Hey guys, and welcome to an IL-2 1946 video. In this one we'll be going over the Spitfire and kind of cross-examining that with Cliffs of Dover and eventually the new DCS Spitfire. If you guys kickstarted or helped back that, or even just purchased a Spitfire for yourself in DCS, there's probably a lot of hype. I'm just going to talk about comparisons here. Very basic. I'm no Spitfire expert by any means, but I'll be looking at mainly the flight model and feeling of flight, as well as the sounds and then finally the combat environment in all three variants. So we're going to start with IL-2 1946, and then move on to Cliffs of Dover, and then we'll stop with DCS. So I hope you guys enjoy. And just to preface this, I am using IL-2 with a lot of mods. This is the HSFX 6 point something mod. There is a 7.0. I haven't upgraded to that, and I'm very impressed with it. I played through the Cliffs of Dover campaign recently, and I did fly the DCS Spitfire, and I have to say this thing holds up so well with its age. I will list mods in the description, including my personal mod pack, but most of this is coming from HSFX. It's about 4.5 gigabytes on top of the base game. Alright, so let's get this thing started. One thing in IL-2 obviously is that you don't have a complicated start. You do have complex engine management, so I have pitch control here. I have mixture control. Actually now this is automatic in this aircraft. And then here's my throttle. You do have brakes, so you can see the brake lever moving right there. And you have differential brakes as well. One of the things that I absolutely love about IL-2, and I've talked about this in previous videos, is when I first jumped into it, coming from flying real aircraft, it just gave you immediate feedback as far as what an aircraft feels like. Now, fast forward into the future, the modern iteration of this is IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad and Battle of Moscow, which I won't be looking at, but the foundation is absolutely there for those sims. You know, I've always said that if you're going to fly FSX, X-Plane, or DCS, or excluding DCS, you should definitely check out IL-2 because it has the closest sensation of flight. And that's true for IL-2, the original, Cliffs of Dover, and eventually Battle of Stalingrad, as well as DCS. So the startup is pretty simple. You know, you do have to control your radiator. I have complex engine management on, and this is a lot like what you'll see in the later IL-2 titles. Whereas DCS is a true is a true simulator. It simulates every nook and cranny. These focus more on combat simulation. So I'll go ahead and close the canopy. One thing that's really cool, if you notice, look at the pilot's head there. When I close the canopy, it'll actually duck down into the seat and then pop back up. Now, it's small things like that just make it magical. Alright, let's get this baby in the air. I'm going to use actually there's no takeoff flaps, just landing flaps in the Spitfire. I'll lock the tail wheel here, give it some left rudder. See the tail pick right up, and I am using an effects mod for dirt, which out of all the sims I think looks probably the best here. If you're wondering which sound mod I'm using, it's Tiger's sound mod. Like I said, I'll put a list of the mods that I'm using in the description, but you can absolutely hear this engine roaring, and it sounds awesome. Alright, engine management, I'm going to bring the RPM back to 2700 per the operating manual, or actually 2800 I should say for a climb. but I'm gonna level out here and cruise, and I'll bring the boost back to 3. So in this configuration, I really have no issues with engine cooling. Considering how old this sim is, it's just absolutely amazing how nice and true life it feels as far as flying. I'll go ahead and open up the canopy here. And you can hear the wind sounds. There is a working mirror. That's something IL-2 Cliffs of Dover is trying to get in the mix. That working mirror there. So you can see how IL-2 has pioneered quite a bit. If the water looks weird, it's because I'm running reshade right now, and I think it's affecting the shadows. Let me go ahead and do a little gun strafe as well so you can hear the weapon sounds. And again, this is modded, but you know, those are some of the beefiest sounds out of all of the sims, in my opinion. Alright, so let's work our way down to the field here. One thing I'll demonstrate is the negative G. This is the Mark 1, so it does have a carburetor. And you can hear the engine cut out as we pull negative G's on it. Alright, so we'll come around the pattern here. I'll get the prop full, mixture out full rich. And this is Dover, Cliffs of Dover area. The cliffs are down there. You can see them in the distance. And just comparing to IL-2 Cliffs of Dover, try to show you what that looks like here. So you can see this is a user-made map, not as outstanding or impressive as IL-2 Cliffs of Dover, but it's not bad for 1946. And one thing I like you to grasp as we approach for landing here is just the massive scale of this map. This is a user-created map, and they've created the channel map essentially from Cliffs of Dover. I think this might have even came out before IL-2 Cliffs of Dover, so that's pretty cool. Alright, so I'll try to do a standard Spitfire landing here. Down to 140. And we'll get the gear and the flaps down. You can see the aircraft reacting to the gear and flaps. And I'll trim her out for this landing speed. I like to make my approach about 120 or so. So IL-2, the feeling of flight in it, it is spectacular. You know, I've always said it's much better, heads and shoulders above default FSX, not comparing it to A2A or some other nice flight models. But as far as any stock feeling of flight, this is it. You can actually do slips, which is opposite rudder, opposite aileron. You can also do stalls and spins in this and recover in a realistic manner. I'll keep some power on during the landing here. There we go. And one thing I like, when I neutralize the elevator, the aircraft does do a 2-point landing, which I didn't come in that fast, but it's quite nice. You can see the awesome effects there. And I'll apply some brakes. and so you can hear them. The sim does offer differential braking. You can see the brake handle there. Alright, so that was pretty much a demonstration in the IL-2 for the Spitfire, and now we'll move on to Cliffs of Dover. Alright guys, so welcome back. This is IL-2 Cliffs of Dover, obviously, and here is the Spitfire Mark 1, which is one of the aircraft that you actually get into as you progress into the campaign. So in this video we're just going to really talk about how this improved from IL-2 1946, and again, this is kind of a way to compare all three sims by comparing a similar aircraft in them. As you can see, the cockpit is 3D. You can kind of peek out the window here. The graphics are substantially improved from 1946. Even though you can pan around the cockpit, I think Cliffs of Dover clearly has a much better layout, much better cockpit, nicer graphics. One thing I'll add, you absolutely have to use the Team Fusion mod for the game. For one, to it be operational and not be crashing all the time. But this adds graphical updates, sound updates. There's a million different things. Probably, I think they do flight models as well. But mostly stability and patches to the game. They add interesting terrains, and they're still working on this thing. Team Fusion 5 is supposed to come out sometime in the future, and they're doing things like enhance clouds, where the clouds will just completely fill up the sky, enhanced lighting, flyable aircraft. So they're definitely building on this, and this is a great sim to invest in. Now, I'll say you can get this on Steam for $9.99, exactly like you can get IL-2, and I would say that they're both worth it. The beauty of IL-2 1946 is that you can fly any theater, pretty much any theater of World War II combat that you can think of. Somebody has created a mission or a campaign, or you can create it yourself, because there's a million different maps. If you get the HSFX mod pack, there's tons of maps in there. And whatever you want to recreate, you want to fly P-38s, you want to fly to Zero, you want to simulate the Pearl Harbor attack, you want to fly off of a carrier in an F-6F. You can do all of those things, and it's the most comprehensive World War II sim out there. One thing I forgot to discuss in the last video was combat in IL-2. There were issues with the AI where they would outclimb you constantly. If you played early IL-2, the original, you remember that the AI would just be in this perfect, completely trimmed flight and climb and outclimb you no matter what aircraft you went in. It didn't matter if historically your airplane could outclimb them. They still did, because the AI flew perfectly, and I talk about this in an AI video. What HSFX does is it brings in the human error to the artificial intelligence. So if you're on their tail and they're kind of doing hard brakes, there's a percentage that they would panic, or they would over G the aircraft, or they would stall, spin the aircraft in a hard turn, right? Or maybe they would make a mistake and dive into the ground. I saw that happen a number of times with the AI. When they would climb, they were not perfectly trimmed out and flying like robots, but they were actually flying like humans. So I think HSFX adds AI. The combat in IL-2 is amazing with HSFX. The combat in this is very similar to that, and you can see where they overhauled the AI. Baseline 1946 AI is kind of simplistic for the most part. This adds a lot more kind of ingenuity to that, and the AI feel a lot more human-like and believable. Okay, so that's combat for IL-2 and kind of this title as well. And we'll talk about complexity as a simulation. The one thing that the Team Fusion mod adds that you didn't have in the other one is somewhat of a clickable cockpit. So as I hover over these dials, you can see I have rudder trim, which I do have mapped. I have elevator trim, which I also have mapped to the joystick. And then here's a mixture knob. Here's the throttle. You have a boost cutout, which the pilots use as a emergency power, even though it wasn't supposed to be. Magnetos 1 and 2, and then you have your basic 6-pack instruments here. RPM, boost, oil temperature, and water temperature there, and then here's your fuel quantity. You also have emergency gear down here, and you have your gear undercarriage handle right here. So not too much. You can't prime the engine like you do in DCS. The primer's right there, and you also can't use the wobble, which I don't think it's even in here. The wobble would spin up the starter, I guess, and you don't have the starters here. So it's interesting, but what you can do, it's a very simple start. You just turn on the fuel cock here. You turn on the magnetos, and you crack the throttle just a little bit. In the DCS model, you would prime this, of course, and then you just hit the engine, and it should crank over. I'll go ahead and open up the radiator full open. You can see the radiator handle moving there. And one thing that's surprising is if you look at the radiator on the right wing there, in IL-2 1946, you can also see that moving, which is awesome. You can also toggle your gun sight, which I really like. It makes it nice when you're not engaged in combat. You can see a little bit clearer out of the window. The flight dynamics of this have increased dramatically, and I will be talking about IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad. This is truly about 80% of Battle of Stalingrad as far as flight dynamics and the feeling of flight. It really is that good. And the sounds in this are absolutely astounding. Alright. One thing that I really don't like is by default you spawn with the engine on in the campaign. And if you notice the brake pressure there, you always start with brake pressure no matter what you do. So you have to tap the brake key and actually empty out the brakes. I think it just starts you with the parking brake on. I had a lot of problems with takeoff in this thing because I didn't realize that until now. So always remember to hit the brake key. You can see the right brake working and the left brake working as I move the brakes. And again, here's our actually, you don't see the handle moving in this one, but it does move in DCS, the little brake handle. All right, let's get it rolling here. And the nose should dip down in just a few seconds. And just like in regular IL-2 fashion, you can go slow motion here. I'll just show you the tail popping up there. And you can see the engine, blue flames coming out of the mufflers there. Some decent smoke effects back there. And this game is really, really beautiful. There's certain scenes where you look at, especially the water, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. Alright, so waiting for 120 or so. And we'll get the gear up. I'll immediately reduce the power to 3 boost. And I'll bring it down to 2600 on the RPM. Really beautiful aircraft. So while I'm here, I'll show you what the gun sounds like. And I'm definitely not a fan of the default gun sounds. I really don't like it. I think authoritatively, none of us can really speak on whether the sounds sound authentic, because unless you've been in a Spitfire in real life with armed armed machine guns, and actually recorded that, or you could testify as, you know, whether that sounds right or not if you were a World War II pilot. We can't really judge that, right? What we can judge is whether it sounds beefy and powerful, and so that's one of the things that I look for. Is whether the sounds have a nice bass and have a nice tone to them. And that's why I really like Tiger's mod for IL-2 1946, and I think it still has some of the best weapon sounds out of the entire series. Alright, so 140 will do the same thing. About 1,000 feet above the airfield now. Put the gear down, flaps down. Same kind of dynamics. Nose wants to come down. Go and get the canopy open. And I get the RPM full. The mixture is 0 right now just because of a discrepancy with auto mixture. Even though I try to get it at 100%, it just doesn't want to stay there. The aircraft flies fine. I'm not sure what that's about. But I do have complex engine management on. About 120 in the approach here. And we'll come back in. So as you can hear, the sounds are absolutely amazing. Getting a good 60 frames per second, so nice performance. All right, there's 120. All right, neutral on the elevator, and you can see a nice two-plant landing. Ooh. Not sure why I was oscillating like that. I might have had some power in there. I think I might have approached a little bit hot there. I was kind of distracted with the outside of you. You can see the beautiful grass effects here. This reminds me a lot of IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad. I won't be reviewing Battle of Stalingrad in this, but I will talk about it, namely because... go ahead and turn this engine off. Namely because there is no Spitfire in it currently. But I will be talking about it. You can see how this is a total foundation to Battle of Stalingrad and Battle of Moscow. The way the aircraft feel, the sounds, even the 3D cockpit, you can definitely tell. You know, every time I'm in this sim, I feel like I'm in Battle of Stalingrad, except it's the Battle of Britain and it's a Spitfire. Just a prediction. You know, I personally think, just like IL-2 started in its most classic form and eventually progressed to 1946 with the mods, and then, you know, eventually there's tons of planes to fly and you can fly in any theater. I think that if Battle of Stalingrad and Battle of Moscow continue their momentum, in 5 or 10 years' time, it will be 1946. If they continue to sell, if they introduce American aircraft, if they introduce British aircraft, I think they're going to do amazingly well. And you know, I will say this, even though I'm not just showing Battle of Stalingrad and the Battle of Moscow, they are definitely the spiritual, I shouldn't even say spiritual successors, they are the successors to 1946, Cliffs of Dover, and it is the future, and I think it's the absolute best World War II flight sim on the market. 1946, there's still a lot of content. There's carrier operations, there's all sorts of theaters, you know, there's desert theaters, anywhere in World War II that you want to fly, you can do that in 1946. Team Fusion 5.0 right now, I think they're coming out with a desert map pack, so you'll have kind of a desert rat type of campaign in there. In other words, all of these sims have their strengths, and they're all relevant. There's no reason why you can't own all of them. 1946 is $9.99 on Steam, and so is Cliffs of Dover. I just finished this campaign, and it was a really cool experience. It was very short, but Team Fusion does add a dynamic campaign generator, and you can enjoy the heck out of this if you buy it. And I certainly recommend that you check it out. So as far as we talked a little bit about combat, the AI is incredibly good, as comparable to HSFX. The sounds are amazing and very immersive. You can hear the wind in the background. And one thing I haven't talked about is performance. 1946 pretty much runs at 60 frames per second, with the exception of some stutters here and there when it's spawning AI. Cliffs of Dover here haven't had really major performance issues. It's more of a crash to desktops, and you know, the saying in the Claude community is run as administrator, run as administrator, run as administrator. If you do not run this as administrator, you will get crashes to desktop. But all in all, God, talk about the sensation of flight in this is so remarkable. You can feel the air resistance of the aircraft. You can feel the wind pushing you around. You can feel the effects of flaps and gear coming down, and even as important as the feeling of that flight, you can hear the air interacting with the airplane. When you throw the gear down, you can hear the wind dragging against the gear and stuff like that. So those all contribute to the feeling of flight. Of course, you can stall, you can spin, you can slip the aircraft. Anything that you can do in the real airplane, you pretty much can do in the simulation. Alright, so we'll move on to DCS last, and we'll talk about my initial impressions of the Spitfire, and we'll have some final thoughts. Hey guys, and welcome to DCS, and we'll be reviewing the Spitfire. This is the Mark 9 version, so it's a little bit different than the 1946 model in Cliffs of Dover, but all in all, it's still foundationally the same aircraft. You guys probably know more than I do as far as the modifications that were made. But foundationally, it's still a Spitfire, so we can kind of compare. We're really going to be focusing on the feeling of flight, the combat environment, as well as the sounds as well. So let's go ahead and get started here. And you can hear the sounds of the wind, which is really nice. So immediately, this reminds me of kind of a nicer Cliffs of Dover, or a Battle of Stalingrad, or Battle of Moscow type of setup. It looks very familiar to me. I am getting 60 frames. Of course, this is non-combat. DCS has been known to have, plagued with performance issues, loading, slow loading times, especially when you get into combat. I remember the P-51. As soon as you start shooting those guns, your frames would get, cut in half or something like that. So it is very intensive. And when I think about DCS, the first thing I really think about it is simulator, right? Now, early in I've been flight simming for something like over 15 years, and when I first got into flight simming, being able to push every button and every knob was very important. Of course, early flight sims, even Microsoft Flight Simulator, didn't have that. We're at an age, a very special era in flight simming time, where we can now click every button and knob, at least in DCS, right? And that was very important to me, because I thought the whole point of a simulator was that it was supposed to simulate a real aircraft. And in order to use that for training purposes, like coming from real world flying, when I got my private pilot's license, it's very important to me to have something like the A2A Cessna, where everything I do in the aircraft, I can translate that to real life. Things like weight and balance, the speed that the aircraft stalls, right? If I move passengers around, how's that going to affect the CG and the handling of the aircraft? What happens when I throw flaps down, right? Does the nose rise or does it descend? How much does it do so? How does the aircraft decelerate or accelerate? What kind of landing distance? Kind of flying by the numbers or creating an aircraft by the numbers is very important. Those things are important to me, right? As I mature in the flight simming community, and as I become an older flight simmer, I realize that all the push buttons and everything are kind of nice, but they're not necessary in a combat flight sim. Now, if I'm using it for training purposes, of course I want the aircraft to exactly represent what happens in real life. For instance, if you were a Spitfire airshow pilot and you were using this for training purposes, then would having an accurate startup matter? Absolutely. would accurate flight model and weight and balance and having everything absolutely perfect, would that affect, would that be important to you? Absolutely. But the reality is, most of us aren't Spitfire pilots. We want to replicate that experience. Would I like the push button stuff in 1946 and Cliffs of Dover? Absolutely. But what I'm realizing is that in combat flight simulation, 99% of the action happens in the air. All right, so you're looking at if the performance is right, all that stuff's great. IL-2, Battle of Stalingrad, Cliffs of Dover, Battle of Moscow, 1946, they all have simple starts. And really, if you think about it, that's only 1% of your combat flight experience. So yeah, the pilot does the start for you, and you don't have to actually manipulate it. Is that a bad thing? No. I used to see that as a bad thing, but now I've kind of done a complete 180, and I realized that, look, as long as the aircraft handles properly and it flies by the numbers, and it feels right, and the feeling of flight and the sounds and all of that is accurate, then if I can just hit, a button and have the pilot start this for me, and then I can just get in the air, the ground handling is accurate and the flight characteristics are accurate, that's good enough for me. Right? So that's what IL-2 is. So don't dismiss IL-2 just because it's you don't get all the push buttons, because that's not what it's all about. 99% of what it's about is when you're up in the air, when you're flying the aircraft. All right. Is it nice that DCS does this? Yes. But one of the major drawbacks of DCS is the combat environment. Look at where we are. This is not a World War II theater, at least not yet. There's that modern vehicle right over there. And we're still in Georgia after 10 years of development. So do not dismiss IL-2, Cliffs of Dover, 1946, and Battle of Stalingrad just because it doesn't have all the push buttons and it doesn't have the fidelity. When I jump into this, I'm looking at flying the Spitfire. I'm looking for that experience. When I jump into Cliffs of Dover, for instance, I'm looking to fly the Spitfire at a lower fidelity as far as the push buttons, but I'm looking to go into combat with the Spitfire. So that's kind of the difference here. And yeah, you can create scenarios and stuff, but at the end of the day, you're still flying over Georgia, over modern buildings, and you're fighting, whatever BF-109. So it just doesn't make sense as of yet. All right, I really believe that, and I haven't reviewed Battle of Stalingrad in this, but I really believe that that's the future. I really think that in 10 years' time, that's going to be, it's going to have all sorts of theaters, all sorts of aircraft, multiple, carrier operations, Pacific theater, European theater. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Okay, so let me start this up, and then we'll get rolling. I'm just going to demonstrate this. I'm just priming the engine here. You got to do that about 5 times, and here's the wobble. So this is part of the fun of the simulation. You can really get immersed. I do like startup sequences, but like I said, as I mature in the flight sim community, if this is automated like in BOS, it's not really that big of a deal. It's not really taking that much of away from the experience. Is it interesting to do this in mid-flight when you lose an engine? Yeah, absolutely. It adds to the experience. Okay, so here's the fuel chock. And I'll pop these buttons here. And I think I got the magnetos on, so that those are ready to go. And I'll go ahead and push these buttons, and I'll crack the throttle just a little bit. Alright, so I got a good start here. And I'll go ahead and taxi out to the runway. And one thing about taxiing the Spitfire is that you do have to be very gentle with her. She's very touchy. You got to take it real slow. And really be dancing on those rudder pedals. So I got it lined up here. I'm trying not to use excessive power. That's a huge difference between the other sims and DCS. canopy closed here. Alright, so everything looks good. I got the RPM full on. And radiator should be full open here. Oh. Alright, let's take a flying here. Alright, here we go. So just initial impressions. I've only flown the Spitfire a couple of times, but it does feel very very realistic and not too dissimilar from Cliffs of Dover or you know, Battle of Stalingrad or something, even though they don't have the Spitfire, but just the feeling of flight that you get is definitely there. And it reminds me a lot of like a A2A type of feeling. And we'll talk about the sound design here. You can hear the wind around the cockpit and everything. So all in all, it's a pretty awesome flight simulator and just an awesome simulation of the aircraft, and that's what DCS brings to the table. Yeah, I can't stress it enough how similar the feeling of flight in DCS is to A2A flight dynamics. Very, very similar. If you love A2A and FSX, you're gonna love these World War II aircraft in DCS. Alright, so let's get the gear down and the flaps down here. And I'll try to land it in a two-point configuration the same way we did in 1946, Cliffs of Dover. Not too dissimilar as far as what the aircraft feel like. I would say that if this is a 10, Cliffs of Dover is probably a 8 or 9 out of 10, and 1946 is probably like a 7 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 or something like that. All right, bring it down here. Try to do a two-point landing and neutral. A little bit of a bounce there. Oh, and not the greatest landing here, as you can tell. Okay, clearly not the best demonstration of landing. Kind of lost it there. Those external views get me. I try to show you guys the cinematic side of things, but sometimes it distracts me. Anyway, all in all, not saying I'm the best Spitfire pilot by any means, but just kind of comparing the feeling of flight again. The combat in this is really restricted. It's not a true World War II environment, but the aircraft, the way DCS simulates the actual aircraft is really incredible, especially the all the buttons that you have and the toggles and everything else. Would I like to see this develop as a World War flight sim? Yeah. Do I think that's going to happen? I really don't know. DCS is being pulled in a lot of directions. They have the helicopter side, the modern aircraft side. There's even potentially like a civilian aircraft simulation type of side. I think some of those things are in the works. And then you have the World War II stuff just kind of thrown in there as well. So, one thing, I think DCS struggles from maybe a lack of clear vision as far as where they're going. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know the inner workings of the company, but it's kind of weird when you would think if they just focused on the modern stuff and released an F-16 and an F-18 by now, then they could just focus on kind of that market. But it seems like they're throwing out a lot of different concepts and ideas, and the problem with that is that you can't be a Swiss Army knife and be good at everything. You have to, a Swiss Army knife is never going to be as good as a K-bar or as a screwdriver, right? You can't be all things, and I think that's what DCS is trying to be right now. But anyway, as far as World War II flight sims, I think Battle of Stalingrad and Battle of Moscow is the absolute apex of that. As far as the graphics, the performance, the combat environment, it's beautiful and almost perfect. They just need to continue developing over the next few years and develop different types of aircraft, different types of maps, and I think they'll continue to do so as long as the revenue's up. DCS continues to be a great simulation, and I don't really see it as a hardcore combat simulation, at least not in the World War II theater. What it does the best is probably the A-10, and it's king of the hill when it comes to that. BMS obviously for modern combat, and then Cliffs of Dover. I've just been really impressed with it. Just kind of testing it recently. It's got almost as much fidelity as this thing, and it feels almost the same way as far as flight. But it's $9.99, and you can fly the Battle of Britain. It's just a great deal, especially with what Team Fusion is doing. 1946 still very relevant. So those are my closing thoughts, guys. It's just to really kind of use the Spitfire as a platform to compare the different flight simulations, World War II flight simulations out there, and help you make your own determination as far as what's worth your time. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Sorry about that landing again. I'm still learning the Spitfire and DCS, and obviously it's more challenging than the other variants. Thanks for watching this video, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.